The wedding reception at Thornbury Hall was everything you'd expect from my sister Charlotte's grand affair. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over tables dressed in cream linen, while servers weaved between guests carrying champagne on silver trays. The September air carried hints of autumn through the open French doors, mixing with the scent of white roses and lilies arranged throughout the Georgian manor. I stood near the bar, nursing a gin and tonic, watching my extended family mingle. My Aunt Patricia held court near the fireplace, her voice carrying over the string quartet. She'd always been the family matriarch, the one whose approval everyone seemed to crave. I'd stopped seeking it years ago, or at least that's what I told myself. "Still working at that little start-up, are you?" Uncle Geoffrey's voice caught me off guard. He appeared beside me, his own whiskey in hand, that familiar, condescending smile playing at his lips. "Your cousin James just made partner at his firm, youngest in the company's history." I forced a smile. "Yes, still at the start-up. We're actually doing quite well." "Quite well," he repeated, chuckling. "That's what they all say before they fold, isn't it? You know, when I was your age, I'd already established myself properly. Real career, real prospects. Not this playing about with computers nonsense." The words stung more than I wanted to admit. 3 years I'd been building my company, 3 years of 18-hour days, sleeping in the office, pouring everything into something I believed in. But to them, it was just playing about. Charlotte swept past in her wedding dress, radiant and oblivious to the tension. She'd always been the golden child. Oxford educated, married to a barrister, everything neat and proper and expected. I didn't begrudge her that. But sometimes I wondered what it would feel like to have the family look at me with that same pride. "Ladies and gentlemen," the master of ceremonies announced, "we'll now hear from the father of the bride." Dad took the microphone, his speech polished and perfect, just like everything else about this day. He spoke about Charlotte's achievements, her grace, her success. Then he mentioned me, almost as an afterthought. "And of course, we're proud of Oliver too, still finding his way, but we all bloom in our own time, don't we? Finding his way. At 28, with a company I'd built from nothing. The champagne tasted bitter in my mouth. The speeches continued. The best man, the maid of honor, each one more glowing than the last. I watched from my corner, invisible as always at these family gatherings. That's when Aunt Patricia stood up, unauthorized, tapping her champagne flute with a spoon. "I simply must say something," she began, her voice cutting through the room. "Looking at Charlotte today, seeing what she's accomplished, marrying into such a respectable family, it reminds us all what proper ambition looks like. Not everyone in this family has that drive, that understanding of what truly matters. Some prefer to chase dreams rather than security, playing at being entrepreneurs when they should be settling down properly." She didn't look at me, but everyone else did. The room seemed to shrink, faces turning my way with mixtures of pity and amusement. My mother's face went pale, but she said nothing. She never did when Patricia spoke. "It's important," Patricia continued, "that we celebrate those who make the right choices, who understand that family reputation matters, who don't waste their potential on—" She paused, finally looking directly at me. "Ventures that amount to nothing." The word hung in the air. Nothing. Everything I'd worked for, reduced to nothing in front of 200 guests. My hands shook as I set down my glass. The room was silent now, waiting. Charlotte looked mortified, her perfect day tainted by this unexpected cruelty. Tom, the groom, shifted uncomfortably. Even the servers had stopped moving. Something inside me snapped, not in anger, but in clarity. I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. "May I?" I asked the MC, gesturing to the microphone. He looked confused, but handed it over. I walked to the center of the room, every eye following me. My heart pounded, but my voice was steady when I spoke. "Aunt Patricia is right," I began, and I saw her smile triumphantly. "I am nothing like what this family expected. When I was 16, sitting in the careers office at school, being told I should consider realistic options because my grades weren't like Charlotte's, I felt like nothing. When I dropped out of university after a year because I knew it wasn't for me, and Dad couldn't look me in the eye for 6 months, I felt like nothing. When I started my company in my mate's garage, surviving on pot noodles and borrowed Wi-Fi, while cousins like James were getting their training contracts at prestigious firms, I definitely felt like nothing. I paused, scanning the room. But here's what being nothing taught me. When you're nothing, you've got nothing to lose. When you're nothing, you stop trying to be something for other people and start being something for yourself. The room was dead silent. I continued, my voice gaining strength. 3 months ago, that little startup that amounts to nothing was valued at £12 million. Last month, we signed a contract with the NHS that will help thousands of patients manage chronic conditions from home. Next week, I'm flying to San Francisco because 3 venture capital firms want to discuss international expansion. But I didn't come here to talk about that because that's not what today is about. I turned to Charlotte and Tom. Today is about my sister and her happiness. And Charlotte, I need you to know something. You were never nothing to me. When I was struggling, when the family had written me off, you'd still call, you'd still check in. You never once made me feel like I needed to be anything other than your brother. That's worth more than any valuation or contract. I faced the wider room again. We all define success differently. For some, it's the traditional path, the secure job, the approval of others. And that's brilliant if it makes you happy. For others, it's the risk, the uncertainty, the chance to build something from nothing. Neither is wrong. What's wrong is making someone feel worthless because they chose differently. I looked directly at Patricia. You said I chased dreams rather than security. You're absolutely right. I chose dreams. And those dreams now employ 37 people. Those dreams help sick children communicate with their doctors from home. Those dreams mean I can stand here at my sister's wedding and tell her that her little brother who was nothing turned that nothing into something. Not to prove you wrong, but to prove myself right. The silence stretched. Then from the back of the room, someone started clapping. It was Marcus, Charlotte's university friend, who'd started his own architecture firm. Then another joined, and another. Soon, half the room was applauding, though Patricia sat rigid, her face flushed with indignation. "Charlotte," I said, turning back to my sister, who had tears streaming down her face. "Tom, this day is about your love, your future, your happiness. Don't let anyone, including me, overshadow that with family drama. But know this, success isn't measured in approvals or conventional achievements. It's measured in courage, in kindness, and in staying true to yourself even when everyone tells you you're nothing." I handed the microphone back to the MC and walked back to my seat. The room buzzed with whispers, but I didn't care anymore. My phone vibrated in my pocket. It was a text from Charlotte. "That's my brother, my brilliant, brave, something brother." Uncle Jeffrey appeared at my elbow again, but his expression had changed. "That NHS contract," he said quietly. "My firm's been trying to get in with them for years. Perhaps we should talk." I smiled. "Perhaps we should, but not today. Today's about Charlotte." As the evening continued, people approached me throughout the night. Some offered congratulations, others business cards, and a few, surprisingly, shared their own stories of being made to feel like nothing. Aunt Patricia left early, claiming a headache, but not before my mother finally found her voice. I overheard her at the coat check. "Patricia," my mother said, steel in her voice I'd never heard before, "you've had your say at every family event for 30 years, but if you ever speak about my son like that again, you won't be welcome at the next one." The wedding continued late into the night. Charlotte and Tom had their first dance to "Your Song" by Elton John, and for once I didn't stand on the sidelines. I danced with my mother, who whispered, "I should have stood up for you sooner. I'm sorry." I told her it didn't matter now, and it didn't. As I drove home through the dark Surrey lanes, I thought about the word nothing. It had haunted me for years, that feeling of not measuring up, of being less than. But tonight I'd transformed it. Nothing became the foundation for everything. The next morning, my phone was flooded with messages. Several were from investors who'd been at the wedding, interested in learning more about the company. One was from a journalist who'd been there as someone's plus one, wanting to write a story about the entrepreneur who turned a wedding toast into a TED Talk. But the one that mattered most was from Charlotte. "Thank you for making my wedding unforgettable, though probably not in the way I expected. Tom and I watched your speech on someone's phone video this morning. We've decided to invest our gift money in your company, not because you're my brother, but because you're brilliant. You were never nothing, you were just something they couldn't understand yet." 6 months later, I was invited to speak at a business conference about overcoming family pressure and defining your own success. I started the speech the same way I'd started at the wedding. I was told I was nothing. The difference was, this time, I knew from the beginning how the story would end. Patricia wasn't invited to Charlotte's anniversary party the following year, but James was. Turns out, watching his cousin stand up to the family bully had inspired him to leave his partnership and start his own practice. "You made being nothing look pretty good," he told me over drinks. The company went public 2 years after the wedding. The IPO documents listed the founders, the board members, the early investors. What they didn't list was the moment it truly began, not in a garage with borrowed Wi-Fi, but in a wedding hall in Surrey, when being called nothing became the catalyst for everything. My father's speech at Charlotte's wedding had said we all bloom in our own time. He was wrong about one thing, though. I wasn't still finding my way. I'd found it years ago. I just needed to stop apologizing for it not being the way they expected. The last time I saw Patricia was at my grandmother's 90th birthday. She approached me cautiously, her usual imperious manner subdued. "I hear the company's doing well," she said stiffly. "It is," I replied simply. She paused, then added, "I may have been hasty in my judgment." "You were honest about what you thought," I said, and that honesty pushed me to be honest about who I am. "In a strange way, I should thank you." She looked uncomfortable. "I don't suppose you need investors?" I smiled. "We're fully subscribed, but thank you for asking." As she walked away, I realized the power dynamic had completely shifted, but more importantly, I realized I didn't need it to. I didn't need her approval, or her money, or her acknowledgement. The wedding speech hadn't been about proving her wrong. It had been about proving that being nothing in someone else's eyes doesn't define your worth. Charlotte found me later that evening. "Remember when you gave that speech at my wedding?" she asked. "Vaguely," I said, grinning. "I never told you this, but Tom's father pulled me aside that night. He'd built his business from nothing too, and the family had nearly disowned him for leaving banking. He said your speech reminded him why he'd taken the risk. He's been one of your biggest champions in his business circles ever since. Success, I learned, isn't about proving critics wrong. It's about proving yourself right. And sometimes being called nothing is exactly the push you need to become everything you're capable of being." The wedding speech video eventually made its way online, shared by someone who'd been there. It went viral briefly, tagged with hashtags about standing up to family bullies and defining your own success. I got messages from strangers saying it inspired them to pursue their dreams despite family pressure. One message stood out, from a young woman in Manchester whose family wanted her to be a doctor, but who dreamed of being an artist. "You made me realize," she wrote, "that being nothing in their eyes means I'm free to be anything in my own." That's the thing about being called nothing. It's meant to diminish you, to make you small, to keep you in line. But what they don't realize is that nothing is just another word for unlimited potential. Nothing is a blank canvas. Nothing is freedom. Standing in that wedding hall, microphone in hand, I'd thought I was defending myself, but I was actually setting myself free. Free from the need for approval, free from the weight of expectations, free from the fear of being nothing, because being nothing, it turned out to be the best something that ever happened to me.